What's up everyone, Darcblade here with another Hunter's Guide to Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. In this episode, we're going to be bringing you another endgame build, this time for the Gunlance. Now, as always, what is an endgame build? Well, these are builds that are constructed from some of the rarest armor, weaponry and decorations in the game. They also feature talismans as well as Krios crafting, but the Krios crafting isn't to the extent where every single piece of armor features the absolute rarest of skills. Also, if you find these videos helpful, informative or entertaining, please consider leaving a like on the video as well as subscribing to the channel, as I try to bring you a variety of builds for a different variety of playstyles. Now when it comes to the Gunlance in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, it has access to one of the most powerful moves in the game in the form of the Bullet Barrage. This self-bind attack allows you to unleash all your shelling attacks at once, allowing for massive amounts of burst damage. But unfortunately, it is on a little bit of a longer timer, shall we say. So with that, I present to you the Bullet Barrage Gunlance build. This build is designed to allow a hunter to use the Bullet Barrage more frequently during a hunt. And on top of that, it's also a decent DPS build for the Gunlance in its own right. So for the Bullet Barrage Gunlance build, you'll need the Risen Kushala Glare, the Lambent Halberd, the Risen Kushala Grande, the Omnio Ateobi, and the Risen Kushala Crus. For your petalace, go with the Demon or Absolute petalaces. Demon petalace if you want to focus purely on damage, Absolute petalace if you want something more balanced with extra health. As for your talisman, go with a talisman with as much attack boost on it as possible. I'm using a talisman that has attack boost at level 3, with an extra point in the Spiritbread core skill, a tier 3 decoration slot, and a tier 1 decoration slot. As for your weapon, go with the Aliof's Asterism, which is the Lucent Nagakuga Gunlance. You can use other Gunlances, but as we are focusing on Bullet Barrage, we'll want to go for long shelling types, as the culmination of all your shelling, Wyvern's Fire, and Worm Stakes is more when you're using long shelling Gunlances. As for the Krios crafting on the weapon, go with a shelling level increase, followed by a Rampage slot upgrade, and then an attack boost augmentation. And as for the Rampage skill, go with one of the anti-species decorations. And speaking of decorations, you've got a lot to use here. So first of all, go for Sharp Jaws to max out Protected Polish, then go for Hard Grinder Jaw to give us maxed out Speed Sharpening. You'll then want Attack Jaws to max out Attack Boost, followed by Cornerstone Jaws to max out Defiance. You'll then need a Magazine Jaw for the Load Shell skill, Jumping Jaws for a few points in Evade Extender, Tenderizer Jaws to max out Weakness Exploit, Artillery Jaws to max out the Artillery skill, and then finally I've gone for a Brace Jaw, which could be considered optional for a point in Flinch Free. So if you've done what I've done here, you have a raw attack of 419 with a poison element of 14. To be honest, the poison rating is negligible. On this build, we are focusing on raw attack as well as the damage from our shells. You'll also have 0% affinity, which can potentially be 65% when you take into account Weakness Exploit and Agitator. You'll also have long level 8 shells with a sliver of purple sharpness, which could normally be an issue, but as we're using Protected Polish, we should be able to keep this for longer periods of time. You also have a strong defense of 833 that is strong against fire and water but weak to the other elements. And when it comes to the switch skills, I normally say these are down to personal preference, but when it comes to the Gunlance, I strongly recommend taking the Blast Dash move as well as Bullet Barrage. Bullet Barrage is obviously the main skill that this build is built around. The rest I would say are down to personal preference. So when it comes to the skills, first of all you'll have attack boost at level 7, increasing the raw attack of this build, and at level 4 or above grants us a percentage bonus to our raw attack. You'll then have Agitator at level 5. Agitator is a skill, in fact a buff, that kicks in when a monster becomes enraged. When this happens, you'll be granted bonus raw attack and affinity. You'll then have Defiance at level 5, which again is a skill and a buff that kicks in when a monster becomes enraged, granting us bonus defense as well as immunity to monster roars, tremors and wind attacks. Next up is Weakness Exploit at level 3. Weakness Exploit is a skill that grants us bonus affinity when we're attacking monster weak points, up to 50% with Weakness Exploit at level 3. You'll then have Protected Polish at level 3, which is a skill that after sharpening our weapon, will gain a protective coating over our sharpness bar, preventing any sharpness loss for a small duration of time. This helps us keep that purple sharpness for longer periods of time, as when it comes to the Gunlance, using shelling attacks and especially Bullet Barrage can eat through our sharpness at incredible speeds. Next up is Artillery at level 3, which is a skill that will increase the damage of our shelling attacks. Nice and simple. You'll then have Speed Sharpening at level 3, which could be considered optional, but I find it a great quality of life for this build, especially as we are using Protected Polish. Speed Sharpening allows us to sharpen our weapon incredibly quickly, allowing us to apply that Protected Polish over our sharpness gauge more frequently. It also means that we can sharpen our weapon during a fight with little repercussion. Next up is Wirebug Whisperer at level 3, which is one of the key skills for this build on our Wirebugs, allowing us to use our Silkbind moves more quickly. It also allows us to hold additional wire bugs for longer periods of times. Ultimately, this allows us to use Bullet Barrage more often. Next up is Burst at level 3, which is a skill that when we're continuously attacking a monster, will gradually gain bonus raw attack and elemental attack. Next is Wind Mantle at level 3, another key skill for this build. Wind Mantle is found on the Risen Kushala armor, which is a skill that after using a Silk Bind move, our wire bug gauge will be buffed. It will have increased recovery speed. This is further enhanced by our hunter if we continuously land attacks on a monster, which will increase this effect, ultimately allowing us once again to use Bullet Barrage more often. However, this buff is completely lost when we sheath our weapon and we'll have to repeat the process. Next up is Load Shells at level 2, which for the Gunlance grants us an extra shell to the Gunlance we're using. You'll next have Evade Extender at level 2, which increases the distance at which we hop and dodge. I've also taken this skill really as our main defensive tool in some respect, as I've not really invested in guard in this build. Anyway, you'll then have Critical Boost at level 1, which is a skill that grants our attacks bonus damage when they crit a monster. I've only really gone for Critical Boost at level 1 because level 1 grants us the biggest boost, but because shelling attacks cannot crit a monster, I've instead decided to focus on artillery skills and attack. Next up is Flinch Free at level 1, which is a quality of life skill that prevents minor knockbacks from monsters and especially our allies. You'll then have Sneak Attack at level 1, which grants us bonus raw attack when we're attacking a monster from behind. You'll then have Adrenaline Rush at level 1, which is a skill when we perform a perfectly timed dodge will be granted bonus raw attack. You'll then have Embolden at level 1, which is a skill that allows us to enrage a monster a little bit more quickly, and in doing so grants us bonus defense, invincibility frames when dodging, and reduced impact when we block a monster's attack. And then finally you'll have Spirit Bird Call at level 1, which is a skill that allows our hunter to receive random spirit birds at fixed intervals during a hunt, reducing the need for our hunter to go out of the way to look for the spirit birds themselves. However, this does not apply to arena quests. So there we have it, those are all the essential skills for this Bullet Barrage Gunlance build. And let's move on to the next section where we talk about the Krios crafting. Now, when it comes to this augmentation system, I tried to go for slot upgrades or extra decoration slots rather than going for rare skills. With extra decoration slots or increased decoration slots, it allows for more customization with our build, and in general is slightly more easier to obtain than, say, attack boost. However, there are occasions where builds do feature rare skills, as this is an endgame build. So for the Risen Kushala Glare, I've got a tier 4 decoration slot upgrade. For the Lambuk Halberg, I've got a tier 4 decoration slot upgrade, as well as an additional tier 1 decoration slot. For the Risen Kushala Grande, I've got a point in attack boost. For the Omnio Eterbi, I've simply got a point in the Defiance skill, and then for the Risen Kushala Crus, I've got another point in the attack boost skill. But every build out there comes with various pros and cons. No build is absolutely perfect, even endgame builds. Whilst they may have massive positives, there are a few cons in the form of normally being difficult to craft. When it comes to this Bullet Barrage Gunlance build, its biggest pro is its raw damage output. Having high raw attack coupled with artillery skills, we're able to take on monsters quite quickly, and because this is a raw attack build as well, it means that we don't have to worry about a monster's elemental resistances. The next pro for this build is the Bullet Barrage itself. Bullet Barrage is an amazing burst damage tool, and thanks to Wind Mantle and Wirebug Whisperer, we're able to use it more often in a hunt. And the final pro for this build is we have skills that synergize well with one another. Defiance and Agitator combined with Embolden, they all work well together when a monster becomes enraged. We have Protected Polish and Speed Sharpening, that gel well together to allow us to manage our sharpness gauge a little bit more efficiently. And then of course Wirebug Whisperer and Wind Mantle, allowing us to utilize our wirebugs more efficiently. But of course there are cons. One of the biggest cons for this build is unfortunately there may be times that sharpness does become an issue. Even with Protected Polish and Speed Sharpening, there are times where your sharpness gauge can fall quite low, especially in prolonged hunts. And the other con is, unfortunately, this build, timing is everything, especially against more aggressive monsters. Sometimes, especially when playing solo, when you're going up against more aggressive monsters, it can be hard to spam Bullet Barrage over and over again, so you have to perform your attacks more wisely. But if you're able to do that, you'll have in your hands one of the most powerful Gunlance builds out there, able to use that Bullet Barrage attacks efficiently and effectively. And for me, it's one of the more fun Gunlance builds to use. So if you're a Gunlance fan, or thinking about just trying it out, I'd highly recommend this build. But what are your thoughts? Please leave a comment down below, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you the Bullet Barrage Gunlance build in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.